Thanks to the worship team for doing a great job with all those songs this morning. A couple of you were asking about the Power Hour meal because we didn't have it specifically listed yet. And we were entertaining the notion of doing a nice, kind of fancy Valentine's dinner, but several of you just said, why not horseshoes again? And so we're just going to go ahead and go with the old trusty horseshoes this Wednesday. So if you didn't sign up, make sure you let us know by tomorrow or Tuesday morning, and you can take part in the heartburn with the rest of us. So we hope you will be here this Wednesday for that. Manasseh was perhaps the worst king, and very appropriate following along with what Tom had to say, perhaps the worst king in Israel's history. Now that's a really funny statement when you think about it, because people say that people are the worst all the time. Some say this is the worst president we've had, and he's been in there just a few weeks. Some people said that for the last 8 years about the previous president. And some people said that about the president before him, and the president before him. And all the way back to George Washington, which would have been true, because he was the first president, so he was the best and the worst all at once, until John Adams, and then they had somebody to compare him to. But, I mean, really, people have said this forever. It's nothing new. What I've discovered is that concept of whatever the worst is about perspective more than reality. However, in Manasseh's case, I'm willing to make an exception and say that perhaps he was indeed the worst king Israel had ever known. For 55 years, he reigned with a dark cloud over the nation of Israel. He would encourage pagan worship that involved whole communities taking part in sexual acts. He installed cult prostitutes in shrines all over the country. He imported wizards and sorcerers from foreign nations to encourage the people to participate in superstitions. The man could not do enough evil. He was also cruel. One day he would take his own infant child and in some terrible dark witchcraft ritual would slowly burn him as an offering. The great temple built by Solomon swarmed with magicians and prostitutes. Lust, greed, idolatry, and murder were the norm when Manasseh was king of Israel. How bad did it get? Well, in 2 Kings chapter 21, we're shown a promise that God made the kings David and Solomon. And it's repeated again to Manasseh. And so we read that promise, and we also read the response. If the Israelites will be careful to obey my commands, all the laws my servant Moses gave them, I will not send them into exile from this land that I gave their ancestors. But the people refused to listen, and Manasseh led them to do even more evil than the pagan nations that the Lord had destroyed when the people of Israel entered the land. Jeremiah was born in the last decade of Manasseh's rule as king. This is the world that Jeremiah would learn to walk and talk in. You could not think of a worse environment to raise a child than during the time of King Manasseh. And then Manasseh died. His son Amon would succeed him, and the people would wonder, what kind of king would Amon be? Would he change away from this cruel, devious individual? And he did not. The evil continued. But the people had had their stomachs full of the evil long enough, and Amon would be murdered. To succeed him would be his own son, 8-year-old Josiah. This is perhaps one of the most remarkable times in these people's lives. Somehow this boy king had maintained his innocence in the face of severe corruption and evil. He loved God and was able to breathe new life into the land. And we wonder how Josiah got started, for he had no good models to work from that we could tell. And so we're not sure. But I think we can understand it in a form of pictures. Picture you see here on the screen is an asphalt parking lot. Now there's nothing too spectacular about that. Fresh grass, plants are plowed away, a solid foundation is made, and the asphalt is laid for convenient parking. Before long, though, cracks will begin to appear in an asphalt parking lot. So maintenance engineers have to fill and patch and seal these lots. But if they fail to do that, then the seemingly fragile, but in fact very formidable light will begin to reassert itself, and it will push through the parking lot, much like you see in the picture here. Manasseh had covered the Holy Land in Sodom and Gomorrah asphalt. But the holy was not gone, it was only invisible. And Josiah was one of the first shoots to break through the cracks of this black and terrible time. Here's the message Jeremiah shares in this setting in chapter 7. The Lord gave another message to Jeremiah. He said, "Go to the entrance of the Lord's temple and give this message to the people. O Judah, listen to this message from the Lord. Listen to it, all you who worship here. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says. Even now, if you quit your evil ways, I will let you stay in your own land. But don't be fooled by those who promise you safety simply because the Lord's temple is here. They chant, 'The Lord's temple is here, the Lord's temple is here.' But I will be merciful only if you stop your evil thoughts and deeds and start treating each other with justice. Only if you stop exploiting foreigners, orphans, and widows. Only if you stop your murdering, and only if you stop harming yourselves by worshiping idols. Then I will let you stay in this land that I gave to your ancestors to keep forever. Don't be fooled into thinking that you will never suffer because the temple is here. It is a lie. Do you really think you can steal, murder, commit adultery, lie, and burn incense to Baal and all those other new gods of yours, and then come here and stand before me in my temple and chant, 'We are safe,' only to go right back to all those evil ways again? Don't you yourselves admit that this temple which bears my name has become a den of thieves? Surely I can see all the evil going on there. I, the Lord, have spoken." So what do these verses tell us? In short, they tell us that people were believing lies that were being commonly told. People were believing lies. Now, one thing we know about effective communication today is it has to be concise in order to be effective. There was the day that 2-hour sermons and 4-hour lectures were the norm, and they were effective. Who wants to go back to those days? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Not one hand. No, that's okay. I don't want to go back to those days either. But we just know that you can't go that long and maintain an effective approach. And so we know that everyone has more limited attention spans. And one group that is out there today that is trying to effectively communicate is called the TED Talks. Is anybody familiar with the TED Talks? All right, so there's about 4 or 5 of us. Well, let me give you all a brief education. TED is an acronym for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And what they do is they limit their talks to 18 minutes or less on a particular topic. And it usually involves one of those 3 fields. But then they have the TEDx Talks, which also deal with political, social, religious issues, and the like. And they bring in various communicators who go around the country and share these very brief thoughts on a particular issue. And it's very effective, and I really get a lot out of listening to them. I usually listen to multiple different ones each week. Now, I don't agree with everything that everybody says, obviously. But there are some times that I get even just one line or one sentence that stands out, and it means something to me. And this week was one of those weeks that I got a lot out of a particular video I watched. It was Monday morning. I was in the office just getting this sermon underway, and I was looking at some TEDx Talks for some ideas, and I came across one put on by Graham Shaw. Graham Shaw is a leader in teaching people how to communicate effectively in their business or their setting, how to communicate presentations in such a way that people remember what they're told. And the TED Talk was entitled, "Why People Believe They Can't Draw." Now, I was very interested when I read this title for a couple of reasons. But the main one was simply because a while back I got this idea, and Missy thought it wasn't very smart, and she's right. And the idea was that I was going to start drawing comic strips for my kids. But the characters in the comic strips were going to be my kids. There was just one problem. I can't draw. So that idea went out the window very quickly. And so then I saw this TEDx, and I thought I'd like to watch it. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you believe you're good at drawing? 2 hands. Maybe a third hand over there. 3 hands. So we're going to say 2 to 3% of the church believes they're good at drawing. Most people believe they are not good at drawing. And I put myself in that same category, or at least I did until this week. People think of drawing like they do about singing or maybe about spelling. You're either good at it or you're not. You're just never going to get it down. If it's not for spell check, it's never going to be right. But what Graham Shaw teaches us is that drawing has a lot more to do with believing rather than talent or ability. And he goes on to say that he's not predicting everybody has the ability to be Michelangelo and paint the Sistine Chapel. But when you listen to his instruction, you can leave feeling that you have the ability to draw. And he says you only need two things if you want to draw: an open mind and a willingness to try. He's actually from England, and so he says, I want you to give it a go. And so this morning, I want you to give it a go. So inside your bulletin, you will notice that you have a kind of different insert. If you don't have one, maybe Greg, I could have you run up here for me. And if you need one of these fancy little inserts, Greg's going to walk around and make sure that you get one. And so raise your hand if you would need one of these. All right, we got a couple hands around there. So go around, make sure everybody gets an insert, and use your hymnal. Try not to draw on the hymnal. That would be kind of sad, and so we don't want to do that. But what we're going to do is I'm going to teach every one of you, using Graham Shaw's instructions. These are not unique with me. I'm going to teach you how to draw a cartoon character face, or a couple different ones. As you see, you've got a couple different boxes on them. All right, so let me grab a proper writing utensil here, and we'll just see how good we can do with that. So you can just hang on to the extras for now. I'll collect them later. Now, you will not be graded on this, but I do want you to try. And you say, I don't care if you like to draw or not. Just participate, please. I would much appreciate it. And so I'm going to just take you step-by-step instructions on how to do this following Graham Shaw. So if you will, with me, let's just start with that right there. Okay, everybody draw that? All right, when you look up at me, I'll know you're ready to move along. All right, very good. And then what we're going to do right at the base of this, we're going to make the number 6. And you're going to fill in the 6 right there, okay? All right, we have people participating. This is good. This is good. All right, we're going to go on to the next one. We're going to make another 6 right above it. Right above it, right there. All right, all right. Okay, I'm seeing some eyes. Give everybody just another moment here. You're on the right track. You're on the right track. Okay. Now what we're going to do, we're going to just kind of pretend there's a line right across here from that bottom 6. We're going to make a backward C and a little C inside of it. All right. All right, everybody's got that? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to start right here at this ear, and we're going to give him some hair. About as much as I have. And so we're going to do that there. All right, okay, everybody's participating. Good, good, good. Okay, then what we're going to do, we're going to go right below the nose here, and we'll just go a little bit past it, not much. And we're going to do a curve up with a little line, make him happy.
Okay, it's taking shape.
Yeah, and it's turning into something almost recognizable at this point. We're doing good. Okay, now we're going to take another line just by the mouth there, and we're going to curve it in and down. All right, all right. And then we're going to go by the ear. We're going to curve it in and down. And then we're going to make a line to the left and a line to the right. And Graham Shaw calls him Spike. Now, show those around you what your Spike looks like. All right. All right, show those around you. Very good, very good. Okay. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you think you did better than you anticipated? Hey, that's at least half. That's great. That's great. We're not done yet. We got a couple more. We got 2 more we're going to do. We're going to do a couple faces that you will hopefully recognize. So, let's go ahead and get ready to start on the next one here. Put that down there. All right, the next one is going to start off just like Spike, because we have a formula that we know works. So we're going to start with that right there again. Same exact start. All right, we're also going to make another 6 and fill it in. And you say, now wait a minute, I thought this was different. It will be different. But let's just get started with the 2 6s. Let's go ahead and put in the second one. All right, now what we're going to do at this point is we're going to make a little change. We're going to start at the nose here. We're going to... All right, make some lines there. And then we're going to just start over here. Little curves. And who do we have?
Spike's sister.
No? Who do we have? Somebody famous. Albert Einstein. Very good. And you can tell just from a few lines that there's somebody famous that you can recognize? Show your Einsteins to those around you.
This is awful. Not very good. I don't know what's happening.
All right, we're going to do one more, and then we're going to get back to business up here. One more. This is also a face that you will recognize, okay? We're going to start this time with a pointed nose, all right? Now, we had used the 6s for eyes, but you know what? If you change just a couple shapes, it completely changes the image that we're working with. So, right next to it, we're going to put a circle. And then right above the nose, we're going to make another circle. And inside of each circle, put a dot for eyeballs. But now what we're going to do is we're going to connect the two circles with one line. I think we understand what he's wearing now, right? Okay. So then we're going to go straight across from those eyes and make that C again. All right? And then we're going to draw a line from this circle to the ear. All right, everybody's doing good. Now what we're going to do is just add a little flare. We're going to put a little hair right along that last line right there, just a little bit. Everybody's got that? Very good. And now we're going to do the same thing under the nose. All right, everybody's got that? We're also, right under that mustache, put a nice little smile. All right, and now what we're going to do, we're going to curve in and down below the mustache. We're also going to follow the ear trail in and down. And we have one more line to draw at this point, and it will be complete. Everybody ready? We're going to start at the middle of the eye over here, and we're going to curve it up and over to the ear. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Tom Fitzgerald. I did get his permission. But that's not too bad, is it? I mean, come on, that's pretty good. Exactly, I couldn't believe it. And honestly, I stumbled across that one by accident. I was following the instructional video, doing as he said to do, and all of a sudden I start looking at it, and I'm like, it's Tom! And I showed a couple different people to verify that I wasn't crazy about this, and they agreed. They agreed it looked just like Tom. All right, now there was a point to all this drawing. You have an extra box there this morning, so go home and entertain yourself this afternoon. That'll be really good. But there really is a whole point to me teaching you how to draw. And this comes mostly from Graham Shaw. When you walk in here today, most of you, except for about 3 hands, believe you could not draw. You believe that you didn't know how to put together a decent cartoon face. But now you understand the basic concept that if you needed to sketch a quick face that looked recognizable, you could do it. And here's the question Graham Shaw asks. How many other limiting beliefs and thoughts do we carry around with us every day? Beliefs and thoughts that maybe we could challenge and think differently about. And if we did that, what would be possible for every one of us? It's my belief that people walk around with lies that they have been told, and they believe it to be true each and every day. And these lies affect our relationships with our family, our friends, our co-workers, but even more importantly than that, they affect our relationship with God. The people of Israel were people who believed lies, and it wasn't the simple lie, I can't draw. No, it was the lie that was destroying their worship of God. People will tell you the lie that life is found in stuff and experiences and food and work. That lie's even told in church. You know how that lie is formulated in church? As you leave here today and go out in the real world, make sure you let Jesus shine. Now wait a minute. The real world's not out there. The real world is with God, and the real world is in worship. Therefore, Israel struggled because they had lost 3 essential truths to their worship because of lies that they believed. And we're going to examine those with the time we have left today. The first one is this. Your life is only as good as your worship. Your life is only as good as your worship. The temple in Jerusalem was an architectural evidence that worship of God was important to these people. Meaning was established there. People's values were created there. Worship defined their lives. And I think some people have difficulty finding meaning and purpose and fulfillment in worship because their worship is off-center. Or they lack finding meaning and purpose and fulfillment in life because their worship is off-center. Let me tell you a couple true stories. When I was preaching at a church, not at this church, a lady greeted me after church. And I'll give you the direct quote. She said, "Mark, that sermon didn't do anything for me today." Well, wonderful. I'm really glad that you said that. I will go back and work on it for you. And I was so dumbfounded by what she said, I probably just said, okay. And I didn't know how to respond to that. Next week, I'm standing there greeting people. She walks up and I'm starting to sweat a little bit, like, oh boy, I can't wait. And she goes, "Mark?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That was better." What, like 6 out of 10? I mean, come on, give me something here. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And I was just amazed. Now, I understand not every sermon can reach everybody every week. I'm not so naive to think that that's going to happen. But really, that sermon didn't do anything for me, and it was better. My dad told me the story when he first started preaching at Nebo. There was a lady who came up to him, and this isn't picking on ladies, by the way. It just happened to be that these are our stories. She came up to him and said, "I don't want you preaching on sin or anything wrong in my life. Just preach to me about stuff that makes me feel good." And Dad responded, "Well, if you're into pain, you're going to love this sermon because we're going to look at sin." And, I mean, how do you respond to that kind of stuff? Let me tell you, when worship becomes about self-fulfillment, instead of praising God, you live in a lie. So many people do walk out of church service, like Greg said, on any given week, and not just this one, any church service. And they think it wasn't great, it wasn't good, it didn't do anything for them, not realizing the worship isn't for them. Our worship is for God. So instead of asking, did worship do anything for me today, we need to ask the question, did my worship do anything for God today? I mean, can you imagine if God's sitting there, "Really, Mark? You're thinking about Steak and Shake while you're standing there. Really? You're thinking about Steak and Shake whenever you're supposed to be worshiping me. You're thinking about what you got to do this afternoon and that little laundry that needs to be done. And you're thinking about I mean, can you see God rating our worship? The quality of our worship will drastically increase when we understand worship is not about us. Your life is only as good as your worship. For 55 years, the life in the temple where worship was centered in Israel was corrupt. As Josiah led the renovation of the temple, as a young boy, Hilkiah the priest found an old document. They didn't even know what it was. And he brought it to Josiah and read it, and it was the book of Deuteronomy. Josiah was determined to do something about the evil land, but he didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden they found this book that gave clear definitions of right and wrong, directions on moral decisions, and an explanation of proper conduct for worship. Immediately, Josiah put into action everything that he read. He instantly banished every aspect of false worship. Under Manasseh, religion was supernatural assistant to get what you wanted. You went to worship to get fulfillment, whether it was visiting the temple prostitutes or asking for a good harvest, to feel good about yourself, or maybe even to murder your enemy. Worship was to get yourself ahead. But under Josiah, he made worship solely rely on God. Faith and practice of that faith determined the lives of the people. The truth is, your life is only as good as your worship. Now, another lie that people believe is as long as you attend church, you're fine. Just get to church once a week. God will be pleased. But the truth is, worship without follow-through is hollow. Worship without follow-through is hollow. Josiah administered the spiritual reform. It was accomplished under his reign as king. But getting rid of evil doesn't make people good. And it didn't take Jeremiah very long to realize that the reform was only skin deep. Everything had changed on the outside, nothing had changed on the inside. Jesus tells the parable of the man who had an unclean spirit that was driven from him, and he cleaned up his inside, but he didn't fill it with anything else. And so the unclean spirit returned with 7 more that were meaner and nastier, and the condition of the man was worse than when he had just one unclean spirit. Worship has to go beyond getting rid of something bad in our life. It has to include being filled with something good on the inside. In Manasseh's day, people were arriving at the temple, offering their sacrifices as commanded, and then they were just living lives that were completely adulterous. In Josiah's day, they were following the commandments in the new best-selling book, Deuteronomy, but it was temporary. Worshiping God was popular. It's what you did on the weekend. It's not what you did throughout the week. So Jeremiah says, don't be fooled into thinking you will never suffer because the temple is here. It is a lie. Do you really think you could steal, murder, commit adultery, lie, and burn incense to Baal and all those other new gods of yours? And then you come here and stand before me in my temple and chant, we are safe, only to go right back to all those evils again? Understand, places are important. The temple was important. A place to come together for us as a body of Christ to worship is important. But standing in a church singing a hymn doesn't make you holy, any more than standing in a barn mooing makes you a cow. James Smith puts it this way in his commentary on Jeremiah. The people of Judah, like the majority of all ages, took worship for granted. They were content simply to show up at the temple and participate in the prescribed ritual. They assumed that God would be pleased with their conduct. The assumption in their lives was that worship had no bearing or conduct on life. They were in the right place at the right time, saying the right words, but Jeremiah saw through it. He called their presence a lie. He said God saw it as a phony show. Now we just read in verses 9 and 10 where the people who commit their sins come to church and chant, we're safe. Understand that there is grace and forgiveness for believers. Because guess what? We're all sinners. We make mistakes every day, every week. It doesn't go by that we're not perfect as Christians. But we have an intention to try to honor God with our lives. We have the motivation to try to put God first. And when we fall short, God's grace abounds. It's a wonderful thing. But when we intentionally go out to seek to sin, when we intentionally go out to break God's commands, and then we show up on Sunday morning and think we're A-okay, that's skin deep. And that's not going to be good enough. Worship without follow-through is hollow. When I was a kid, we had several large trees that are still there in the yard at my parents' house, and us kids enjoyed climbing up in them. And one of them was a hard maple tree. Now take a look. You'll see a picture here. We actually climbed in the tree recently. This is my brother, my sister, and myself. And we're also smart that we climb trees in flip-flops. Don't encourage that. But that's the tree right outside the front of my parents' house. We climbed up in it year after year, all the time. And this was just a couple years ago. Now, if you'll notice where my knee is kind of leaning on the tree there's kind of a little ridge there. And that used to be another branch on the tree that had grown out. It was a nice big tree branch. We would climb out on it just like the rest of the tree. Well, several years ago, we noticed that the bark was peeling a little bit. And the leaves weren't sprouting as many. And they weren't lasting as long. And so my brother got a chainsaw. Hopefully he wasn't wearing flip-flops at the time. And he cut off the branch. And what we found is this branch, which was probably a foot thick, at least half of the middle was completely hollowed out, and there were millions of ants crawling in and out of it, or termites of some sort that were just eating through the branch. On the outside, you could tell something wasn't quite right, but it was still sufficient, and it still held our weight. But what we didn't realize is though the branch looked sturdy and strong, it was really hollow and becoming dangerous to anybody who would climb on it. Now, as kids, we climbed all over that tree. As adults, we were on it too. What we didn't realize was how dangerous that branch was. That knot on that tree serves as a reminder that what happens when we become hollow on the inside. Oh, the outside looks great. We're dressed up for worship. We're ready to go. Not knowing that our inside is rotting. Jeremiah 7:12 says, "Go now to the place at Shiloh, where I once put the tabernacle that bore my name. See what I did there because of all the wickedness of my people, the Israelites." Shiloh was one of the most famous holy places in all of Hebrew history. When Joshua brought the people into the promised land after 40 years in the wilderness, they set up the tabernacle, which was where God was worshipped at the time, at Shiloh. The 12 tribes had assembled there to divide up the land of the promised land. The Ark of the Covenant, which represented God's presence, rested at Shiloh. The prophet Samuel spoke to the nations at Shiloh. For 300 years, Shiloh was the center of worship of Israel. But Shiloh, at the time of Jeremiah, was a field that was filled with rocks and weeds. Shiloh was the right place. Shiloh was the place where the right words were spoken. But when the right place no longer launches a walk with God, and when the right words no longer express themselves in love of others, Shiloh is destroyed. It's hollow. If it can happen at Shiloh, it can happen anywhere. And yes, it can even happen here. It's never enough to be in the right place and say the right words. It's never enough until we are walking with God 24/7. It's never enough until our faith is fully expressed not only in word, but in action. If I'm going to sum up this point for you, let me say it in one sentence. Worship goes bad when there's an inconsistency between God's house and our house. Worship goes bad when there's an inconsistency between God's house and our house. Last lie, people are told, well, I went to church, did my good deed for the week, I'm good to go. The truth is, worship is a lifelong career. Worship is a lifelong career. In premarital counseling, one of the things that I emphasize when I start talking with couples is weddings are easy, but marriages are difficult. People want to make sure they have everything in place to get married. You know, the bride says, okay, where's everybody going to stand on the stage? But I want to know, what's your plan of forgiveness when you make a mistake? You know, the couples want to plan the wedding, and I'm more interested in planning their future in a marriage. They want to talk about music for the ceremony, and I want to talk about the emotional roller coaster that marriage can be. You know, I can do a wedding at a moment's notice with my eyes closed. And say, Mark, I need to do a wedding 10 minutes after church. I can do it. I know the right words. I know where to stand. I know what needs to be done. But a marriage takes year after year of careful, wide-eyed attention and alertness. Now, weddings are important. They're beautiful, they're impressive, they're emotional, and as many of you know, they are expensive. Weddings can make people laugh and even bring people to tears. We take such great care that people practice their wedding to be in the right place at the right time, saying the right words. Every detail, every flower, every candle is at just the right place at just the right time. All that being said, a wedding is easy. Marriages are much more complex and difficult to follow through with than a wedding ceremony. In a marriage, every detail that was planned in the wedding is lived out. Every promise and vow is made a reality. As you don't say for better or worse, you live for better or for worse. For rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do you part. In marriage, we announce that we're going to have a life of faithfulness and love. Or in a wedding, we announce that. And in marriage, we have to live it out. It hardly matters if the couple dresses up years later and recommit to those vows and wear nice clothes, if there's no continuing tenderness, love, and attentive listening and giving to one another. Josiah's reform was like a wedding between God and his people. Jeremiah's concern was going beyond the ceremony and living out the wedding in a marriage. It was a great achievement to go through the wedding, but it was a lifelong career to embrace God and walk in his ways. Well, as the worship team joins me on stage, let me remind you that you came in here today thinking you couldn't draw. You didn't know how to draw a cartoon character, but now you can sketch one in an admirable kind of way. What other lies are you holding on to? What is affecting your worship and your walk with God, not just on Sunday mornings, but every day of the week? Do you believe the lie that you're getting ready to go out into the real world, or do you embrace the truth that this is where real life happens? Do you believe the lie that showing up is more important than embracing the message of Jesus in your heart today? What lies do you believe? What is affecting your real life? At this time, I ask that you embrace this truth. I ask that you embrace the truth that real life is found right here and right now. And the message is simply this: Jesus died to give you real life. This morning, if you need to come alive for the first time, or you need to come alive again for the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, I want you to meet me down front and experience real life.